Good morning, everybody. Welcome from my home office slash wife's art room slash place where all the boxes go. Hope you are in a comfortable position as well. For this morning's presentation, I'm actually going to start off with a couple of poll questions. So Chris, maybe you could pop up the poll questions there. And I don't think I'll see them, so you'll have to let me know when they're there.
Okay, beginning with the which county?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I just opened up the poll.
All right, so first quiz question. Which county in the Midlands and CSRA, and again, those are the counties that we cover, that you're part of our area, has had the most tornadoes between 1950 and 2019? So you can click on your numbers there, and Chris can read off what the poll says.
Yep, looks like we're still getting a few responses in, but so far, well, I'll wait. I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah. Yeah, you can tell me what the so far what we've got, because I don't actually see them from my point of view, what the percentages are.
Okay, well, it actually looks like responses have started slowing down, so I can read out the percentage. It looks like right now we're 30% Aiken County, 13% Lexington County, 17% Richland County, and 40% Orangeburg County.
All right, well, I'm not going to tell you the answer because it's going to show up during the presentation, but let's go on to the second poll question. This is all just to make sure your coffee or tea or whatever beverage of choice in the morning is kicked in. Which month and year had the most tornadoes from 1950 to 2019 in the Midlands and CSRA?
All right. Still getting some polls in here. It looks like about 50% of people have voted. Still
Okay.
getting some in. All right, it looks like responses have slowed down a little bit here. We're at 42% March 1984, 3% November 1995, 29% September 2004, and 26% March 2008.
Yeah, pretty good spread, except nobody likes November. We actually had one of our larger outbreaks that have occurred back in November of 1995. But for now, let us look at the presentation here. Can you see my presentation, Chris?
No.
Okay. I'm just seeing a big picture of me, but I've kept my presentation up.
Let's see. There should have been a pop-up that you received that said accept presentation.
Yes, and
okay.
I did hit that.
And then under the sharing tab, there is a big green play button that where you can show your screen.
So now you should have it.
Yep. I see.
All right, great. All right, so this study was done. Most of the work was actually done by a student of mine who has since been hired by the National Weather Service office in Indianapolis. So let us go through a little bit. Anybody who's done any tornado research knows that there are multiple places to get the data. So there's actually quite a bit of time spent by the student looking at the different databases and getting them all so that they were equal, because the two databases that were the main sources of this actually have different things and small errors and stuff. And so there's actually a lot of time spent QCing to make sure that the information that we're showing you is the best that's out there possible. So originally there was a data set, and every tornado track and county segment was represented separately. Then we created an alternate data set where each tornado was listed, even if it went through multiple counties. So you'll see some results from all of this. So between 1950 and 2019, March was the month that had the most tornadoes, barely. But if we include 2020, then April would kick in to the lead. But you can obviously see that March, April, and May are our favorite months for tornadoes, which is not surprising. That's quite true for most of the Southeast. The summer kind of slows down, might get some smaller ones here or there. Then in the fall, the September, that high number in September is mainly due to tornadoes that are spawned by tropical systems as they moved inland. November is also a second season of potential for tornadoes. We've had a couple of significant outbreaks during the month of November in our history. And then, as one would expect, it kind of slows down over the winter time, but as we all know, it never goes to zero. And as a matter of fact, the tornado event that John will be talking about later up at the high school was a January event. So really any time of year we can get them, but spring is certainly the most favored time. If we look at all the count by year during the period that we did it, you can see a very significant increase on the right side of the screen, starting from about 1990 and moving forward. Why is this the case? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, the Doppler radar got into our system here in the mid 90s, and you can see from 94 on, the number of tornadoes rapidly increased. We were simply able to detect more tornadoes at that time. A second invention, if you'll call it, for better or for worse, that started occurring in the late 90s and really took off once we got to the year 2000 and beyond, is social media. So we get a lot more reports now that we didn't have in the past of potential tornadoes. So a lot of what you see back here, when you go back into the 80s, all the way back to 1950, it just wasn't as many reports that we would get in the office. Additionally, I don't think, people were as aware to call into the Weather Service if they had something, unless it was a really big event. So you notice there's a lot of the smaller tornadoes, what we call F0 and F1s, that started from 1990 and beyond, and there were much, much fewer before that because we just didn't have the technology or the communications interface to get all that information across. So if we look by decade, that's another way to quickly look at the big jump in tornadoes. There's 100 and almost 150 in the 2000s, but there's a noticeable, almost an order of magnitude difference. There is an order of magnitude between the 50s and 2000s. So really a huge jump. And again, it's not necessarily due to significant climate change. It is due to the fact that we got Doppler radar in and that we had more people reporting. If we look at the stronger tornadoes, F1 to F4, so we're eliminating the F0s, there's still an increase, but you notice that the increase for the last 3 decades is not nearly as high. And as a matter of fact, if you take out the F0s, the 2010s had the same amount as the 1970s. And so we're seeing a lot more of the weaker tornadoes, and we're getting more reports of these weaker tornadoes into the office. Here's the quiz question for number 1. What county? Orangeburg, and it's not even close. Orangeburg in that time period has had 62 tornadoes. And then you go to kind of a second tier. Lexington, Newbury, Aiken, and Richland are all up in the upper 30s. And then it slowly works its way down to where the CSRA actually has had fewer there in Columbia County, Richmond County, McDuffie County. So they have reported less tornadoes during that same time frame. Look at the county by alphabet. This might be a quick way for you to find your county if you're responsible for a specific county. Again, it's the same list. It's just instead of being in order, you can go and see where your county is. So let's look at it by F scale. Obviously, the most significant tornadoes are F2 and stronger. We've never had an F5 in our CWA or in the state of South Carolina for that matter. But you notice that the F0 and F1s, the lower end of the tornado scale. Now, again, I say lower end, they're still potentially dangerous for sure. But almost 80% of the tornadoes were either F0 or F1. Now we get into the F2, which are potentially more damaging, and we're talking about 17%. And then the F3 is 4%, and the F4 you can't really see on this map, but it's 1%. So 5% of the tornadoes are F3 or F4. So fortunately not a large number, but those are the ones that usually do the most damage and unfortunately also the most fatalities. Another way to look at the season again, known as spring, almost half of the tornadoes are during the springtime, again, March, April, May, but they are somewhat spread out over the whole year. Again, you see a little bit of an autumn peak again, both because of the September tornadoes from tropical cyclones, as well as tornadoes in November, where we can get some decent outbreaks. So here's a map of every month in our study, and the winner is September of 2004, and the big contributor to that particular event was Hurricane Francis. There was a lot of tornadoes from Hurricane Francis, and then we also had Hurricane Jean during that month too. Second place was March of 2008, very big. The Ides of March had a very large outbreak of tornadoes during that time frame. Here's one that includes the whole entire state of South Carolina, just to show that how that September 2004 event really stands out that month. I should say month, because it was multiple events. It was multiple tropical systems. And then similarly, the March of 2008 event also really stood out. If you go back, if you go back to the first 4 decades, you notice the one that is the highest here is March of 1984, which was the most severe tornado outbreak in terms of fatalities and the strength of the tornadoes. So the 4 greatest CWA tornado outbreaks, again, this does not include the 2020 event, which would fall in here for sure. But the Ides of March, there's 28 in one supercell outbreak. If we go to September 2004, there's 22 from Francis, another 9 from Jean, and there are actually 2 from Ivan. These were all storms that did not make landfall in South Carolina, but were storms that moved out of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Then on August 16th in 94, there was a significant outbreak from Tropical Storm Beryl. And then the November 95, there was a squall line outbreak. Fortunately, they were mostly weak, although there was one F4 just outside our area in Marion County. So here's a quick look. I know I'm running out of time here, but I want to show you the graphs. Again, you can look at your county and see the Chesterfield and Lancaster F4s. Those are all from the 1984 outbreak, and the Fairfield and Kershaw were similar. So most of the major tornadoes were from the 84 outbreak. You can see that Newberry seems to be a magnet for F3 tornadoes. They have the most F3 tornadoes. And then there's Orangeburg with a whole bunch of tornadoes throughout ranging anywhere from F0 to F3. That's all South Carolina. We won't go too deep into that, but I have that information if y'all are interested. Here's a heat map. Essentially, this is a map of the state of South Carolina where all the tornadoes have touched down. This does not cover the length of the path. It just covers where they've touched down between 1950 and 2019. And so our folks in the CSRA don't feel left out. There's a similar heat map covering the Augusta area and Aiken and everywhere in the CSRA. So you can see that if we go back 60, 70 years in time, most of the area, I'll go back to this map, most of the area has been pretty darn close to a tornado touchdown. So there's not really a quote safe place, if you will, within the state. Everybody is similarly vulnerable to having tornadoes. So for summary, we generally are 5 to 15 a year is what our tornado count is since the early 90s, but it can range significantly. Generally, there's 3 different types of events that give us these outbreaks. We can have a supercell outbreak. We can have a lot of tornadoes develop on a squall line, and then tropical cyclone. Of course, the threat is present in all 12 months, although our peaks are March, April, and May. And then there are minimums in October and December. Since the Doppler area, we've got no significant long-term increase in trends. The threat's always been there. We're just more aware of it. And again, Orangeburg County is a big outlier when it comes to the number of tornadoes. So that's my presentation. I don't know, is there time for questions, or I don't have a clock here?
Maybe we could try to squeeze one question if there's time. If not, people could go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and if we can't get to it now, Frank will get back to you at some point in the future. Anybody have any questions?
All right, I went through that pretty fast.
All right, thanks, Frank. Yeah, a lot of information in there, but it's really good to see, you know, the numbers in general, how it impacts the state and areas most impacted. And I'm sure Billy in Orangeburg will agree as the most tornadoes in the state, because we're out there all the time doing the surveys. But all right, well, I appreciate it, Frank. If anyone has any questions for follow-up for Frank, you know, please feel free to put it in the question box there, and we'll get back to you with an answer as best we can.